Hello and welcome back to Kvikmyndapod, an Icelandic cinema podcast. I'm Rob Watts, and on this podcast, me and my good friend Ellie Cawthorne chat about Icelandic film. This week, sadly, we come to the end of our first journey through the films of 21st century Iceland, but we're ending on a good one. Now, we've seen a lot of Iceland in the snow, therefore, since it's summer, we thought we'd end on a sunny film. This is the land of the midnight sun, but even so, that big burning ball of gas is in short supply in Iceland, so you've got to make the most of it. But what if you can't and it's someone else's fault? That's the setup for this final week's film, another darkly comic movie titled Under the Tree. Can you guess what's in the way of the sun? Let's find out. Hello, Ellie.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
No problem. How are you doing today?
I'm fine, thanks. I've got the sun shining on me, and so I'm ready to go. Unlike if there was a big tree outside casting a big shadow on me.
Yeah, you're not in Abjorg's position today, are you?
No, I'm not.
So that's a good way into the episode where we're going to be talking about Under the Tree from 2017. This is a film by Þorsteinn Sigurjónsson. The Icelandic title is Undir trénu, and I'll do a little synopsis, as I usually do.
Please do.
In a Reykjavík suburb, a large maple tree in the garden of Inger and Baldvin casts a shadow onto the porch of their neighbours Konrad and Abjorg, and the dispute over doing something about this tree slowly spirals out of control. Meanwhile, Inger's son Atli is dealing with the fallout of his betrayal to his wife. And this is a comedy, right? Is it?
I think it is, actually. Do you know what? Even more so than some of the other ones I've seen, it possibly gets even darker, but it definitely has funny moments and laugh out loud moments, actually, I thought as well.
Oh, good. Well, we'll come to those then, because I'm not sure where I laughed out loud, if I laughed out loud at all. It's because it's very, very bleak. It's very dark.
Incredibly bleak.
Yeah, it's just a bit... It's that classic Icelandic thing that we've seen across the series of it just being very understated and very almost to the point of, I don't know if I'm allowed to laugh or if I should laugh.
I think this is kind of a bit further though, isn't it? Because the laughs, or some of the laughs I had, were almost like shock laughs, and we might come to some of them later. I'm thinking particularly of certain dogs on certain porches, but we can discuss that further down the line maybe.
Yeah, that is a standout moment.
Hvað er að gera hérna? Það eru bara drullusokkar sem halda fram hér.
Kamelgulir, frakkar og fingur.
Þetta með tréð. Þetta er aldrei skuggi svona sem að fellur á vallin hjá okkur.
Þetta tré verður látið í friði. Hefurðu séð köttinn minn? Hann er horfinn.
Æ.
Og við erum farin að skaða hvort annað.
Þess. Það er allra horfa á okkur.
Akkur látum við svona?
So obviously the film centres around the two couples, the elderly couple, not elderly, but the older couples, Inger and Baldvin and Abjorg and Konrad. But it opens with a scene that feels kind of unrelated. I mean, there's a whole plot that feels kind of separate to this main plot, but it's Atli, who is Inger and Baldvin's son. At home, he's in bed with his wife. He can hear some sex going on somewhere, and he decides to go and have a wank in the living room over a sex tape with his former partner.
This was a scene of many twists and turns, wasn't it? Because you thought the way it was kind of edited together, you thought, first of all, okay, we're seeing the people that are next door having sex. Then you realise it's on a screen, so you think, okay, he's watching some porn video. And then it turns out it's actually him in an old video with an old girlfriend. So there was a lot to digest in one opening scene there.
Absolutely, yeah. It was quite cool in its twists and turns within such a small kind of mundane scene.
This whole storyline was interesting to me because I think, I'd watched the trailer before and I thought, how is this going to fit into any of it? Because it definitely seems like quite tangential, this whole Atli storyline. I know that they kind of come together in the end, but quite a lot of time is devoted to this storyline, possibly as much as the debate over the tree.
Yeah.
So I think that's maybe perhaps a bit misleading in, say, like the trailer. You think it's just going to be a straight war of, keeping up with the Joneses, but there's actually this whole other strand to it, which seems to do something else entirely.
Well, maybe. I think thematically it's quite similar. Yeah, the whole thing is Fargo-like. So within quite a mundane situation, things just sort of slowly spiral and get out of control. And I think that's, to a lesser degree, seen in the Atli and Agnes story. But also that their story allows the characters in the main plot to show another side of them. I'm thinking specifically Baldvin, who there is one moment I laughed out loud at, and that's Baldvin talking to Atli at one point. But yeah, it kind of feels like it's quite top heavy with this relationship drama, but then it kind of lets it go and we see the tree in question, etc. But my thought was, because it dominates so much of the film, is Agnes's response justified? The weight of her response, like how much she just immediately shuts him out of her life.
Maybe good. That's an interesting question. But I think we kind of learn more about the situation, don't we, as it develops? So at first it does seem like that he's cheated on her. And then this idea that emerges as that he's kind of cheated on her emotionally, as it were, by watching this video of him with an ex-girlfriend, rather than necessarily actually doing anything while they were together. And then it kind of develops again that she says, we should probably have never got together and our relationship hasn't worked for ages. So I feel like there's a lot of context there that you don't really get until a bit later on, because obviously you don't see their relationship before their relationship ends. So I wonder if, there's something in that you're kind of meant to infer. I'd also say that I find he definitely was quite threatening, wasn't he, when he went to her workplace and the kindergarten and stuff, in a way that I thought, yeah, fair enough, he can get lost.
Okay, I agree, but it just seems like he's not given any chance to talk to her, to talk this through. And yeah, you're right, maybe that's already happened. Like, we're at that point where he could have done all these things and this is the breaking point. But for so much of the film, I'm just like, just talk to each other. If you talk to each other, then none of this will happen. Like, you've changed the locks within, I don't know, like 12 hours or something. Like, he can't get back into his own house where everything that he owns is. And so he's resorted to trying to talk to her in person, which results in, the slowest car chase ever and some quite, like, what does become quite threatening behaviour, like when he's at her workplace and when he throws the phone and when he basically abducts their child. But it's...
you said that in quite... Oh, and when he kind of basically abducts their child.
Yeah, it's just that kind of... It is obviously terrible, terrible behaviour, but I sort of felt for him, not necessarily justified, but like I understood why he was doing what he did.
I know what you mean about that kind of mirroring of the escalation of things, so that before you know it, you've created a really kind of toxic atmosphere.
Yeah.
And I guess a lot of divorces probably do go that way, that it starts off a couple of small things and then it's just more and more and more and it snowballs, which definitely seems to happen. And then, but I guess with that storyline, we see it all escalating and kind of falling apart, but then we also see it coming out the other side of that.
Yeah.
But as it turns out, it might be too late. Yeah.
Well, we'll come back to that relationship as we talk through the main plot, I suppose, which is the titular tree. Some information on the tree, actually. So, well, some context.
I didn't think that the tree would be so central. The tree itself.
Well,
go on then.
Well, I mean, it's the crux of the plot, isn't it? But actually, this kind of situation apparently is quite common in Iceland. The director talks about how neighbour rage is quite a thing in Iceland.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, actually, I did want to mention when we're kind of talking about that theme that obviously one thing that happens in the storyline is there's the house meeting, as it were, of the block of flats, which definitely is to try and reinforce this idea that everybody is annoyed with their neighbours, in which we have the neighbours complaining about somebody's noise, which again is a really funny scene, but is a very strong echo of the main storyline of kind of neighbourly tensions.
Yeah, absolutely. And no one gives a shit about Atli and Agnes's problems.
Yeah.
They're like, can you stop making loads of noise to the younger couple and the drains need doing? I thought it was quite interesting how the guy who runs the sort of house meeting is Gisli from Let Me Fall. And he's basically playing the opposite character. Yeah.
Was that him? Oh my God. I did not realise that at all. And also, I did realise, obviously, that Agnes was Stella from Let Me Fall.
Yeah.
But it did take me probably 2 scenes to kind of make that connection.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Gisli, he was unrecognisable, I think, because he was so noticeably horrendous in the last film we saw him in.
Yeah, but also it's so pathetic. Well, not pathetic, but just like
Yeah,
exasperated.
I'll go with pathetic.
Yeah, okay, fine. He really can't deal with even really talking about sex. Like, it's embarrassing for him, whereas before it was just, the other end of the spectrum. But that scene is brilliant. We've seen quite a lot of group meetings, like family and friends meetings, and this one was one of the more comical. But I definitely like that idea that it reflects the main plot. Yeah.
Já, ég held að sé kannski bara rétt að við byrjum þetta og þetta alveg ógeðslegt og það er búið að margtala þetta við ykkur og það breytist ekki neitt og það ómar húsið svoleiðis háað inn í ykkur.
Það heyrast orðaskil.
Já, á milli íbúða, og fólk að reyna bara að sofa þú veist, hún þarf svefn og setningarna sem eru þú veist, glimjandi í húsinu í eyrun á manni, þetta eru bara setningar sem að bara engin lifandi manneskja á að þurfa að hlusta á, bara aldrei.
Veistu, er eitthvað læti?
Er eitthvað læti? Já, það eru læti. Já, þú veist, fingur í endaþarm. Þú veist hvað.
I'm sorry, I kind of digressed from you saying about the neighbourly tensions in Iceland.
Yeah, so neighbour rage. I mean, we all have it, don't we? We all sit there at home, especially in a terraced house, like, can you just shut the fuck up? I'm trying to record a podcast or something. But in Iceland specifically, there aren't many trees. That's a defining characteristic of the landscape itself. And also the sun, there's not so much sun in Iceland. You know,
2 things that are in short supply.
Exactly. So in the winter, just basically no sun. And in the summer, it's there, but not for a long period of time over the course of the summer. So people want as much sun as they can get when they can get it, but people are also very protective over their trees. And that combination, that's pretty explosive. So in that respect, it's quite an Icelandic specific story.
You'd think, though, that there's not that many people in Iceland compared to the amount of space there is, that it wouldn't be such an issue because there's a bit more space per person.
Yeah, I guess. But then you look at that, I think it's like 60s, that suburb that they're in, and they've built it like any other city. So the houses are terraced and they're next to each other. And so if you want a tree in your garden, I mean, I don't know whether that tree was like grown from a seed
that would be like a 40-year-old tree, surely.
Yeah.
It was a big one.
So I don't know whether it's planted, but it's in your garden. It's just part of your house. So you're not going to want to get rid of it. And when the houses are all so tightly packed together, it makes sense that it's going to impede on your neighbour's porch and their sunbathing times. But yeah, like I was going to say about the tree, so they couldn't actually find a tree in the right location. So the tree that was in the film wasn't really in that garden.
Oh.
The director put a call out. He likes maple trees, apparently. So he put a call out for people who might be considering cutting down their tree. Mm-hmm. Some couple were like, yep, we've got a tree you can have. So they cut the tree down, filmed it all in like a big open space. They shot the shit out of the tree and then cut the crown off and just stuck the what's the main part of a tree?
Trunk.
The trunk, that's it. God, my tree knowledge.
The stem.
The stem of a tree. The trunk. So they just stuck the trunk in the garden and used that, and then CGI did the top, which I thought was quite interesting because this film has a lot of parallels with Rams. And I just like the idea that CGI is used so subtly for the most mundane of things. You wouldn't notice.
I would never, ever have known that the tree was CGI.
No. It's quite a cool idea, but also quite funny that if this is a situation that arises all the time, they still had to find a tree and, fake it. But we all have these problems with our neighbours, don't we? And it kind of...
Well, you're next door to a park, so nobody there's annoying you.
Is that sarcasm? Because the park is full of people walking dogs and screaming and...
You can't really develop a long-standing feud with the general public in a park.
Okay, no, that's very true. Yeah. I mean, how would you feel if you were Björg in this situation?
So I actually think that Björg is pretty blameless in this whole sequence of events. Okay, because I feel it's fine to say, I don't suppose you might be able to trim your tree a tiny little bit. That's legitimate. Maybe it's a bit diva-ish, yeah, but it doesn't, deserve you having your dog murdered for it. I feel
Spoiler? I mean, we're going to get to it.
We're not going to get to that. All she really does is go out cycling and be mildly sarky. I didn't massively warm to her, but I did think that she was probably one of the most guiltless. It's definitely Inger that sets events on fire in a seemingly inexplicable way, in a way that you're like, you don't have to be that horrible.
No. No. Let's talk about Inger then, because you're right. Björg, she just wants some sun, and she's asked her husband to ask nicely if they'll trim the tree, and we see that scene.
She's really not so interesting as a character, actually, I don't think, as some of the others. She's just kind of a normal-ish person that happens to be there. Yeah,
she has a little bit of sort of backstory, or she has a bit of story about they're trying to get pregnant. And they're both slightly older. But that's kind of all she's really given. That and that she's quite healthy and fit. But Inger, on the other hand, is a force of nature.
Yeah.
So the actress who plays Inger, Edda Björgvinsdóttir, she's apparently quite famous as a comedian in Iceland. As is the actor who plays Atli. So I think it's quite interesting how you've got these really quite, especially in Inger's case, like really dramatic roles played by comedians, ostensibly. What did you think of her performance? She is stone-faced, like, bitch, right?
Yeah, she is stone cold. And she's just kind of like this broiling bag of rage and bitterness, isn't she, really? From pretty much day one. But obviously we do see kind of cracks in that facade. So when it's her son's birthday, the son that has died.
Oh yeah, so we should say that. We find out early on that Atli is Inger's son, but also she had another son called Uggi, who seems like she preferred.
And this is, I guess, the idea that this is where all her bitterness and her rage is kind of coming from, the loss of her son.
The grief.
We definitely see, a kind of a more grieving, sad side of that. One of the moments I probably shouldn't have found funny, but was funny, was when she had the dinner party for the dead son's birthday. And
eating
then started singing Happy Birthday at the dinner table while crying, which obviously is so tragic, but
really
somehow
is.
it was it was funny too.
Yeah, proper like cringe funny. I just sat there like, oh no, can't bear it. And even Atlee's like that. He's not even upset. He's just like, this is just horrible. I don't want to be here. And he hasn't got anywhere else to go really either.
Skáluggi minn og til hamingju með ammali. Hann og ammæli í dag. Hann og ammæli í dag. Hann og ammælan Uggi. Hann og ammæli í dag.
Hann draf sig. Þú veist, getur bara please hætt þessu? Ha? Pabbi?
I do think that it's definitely Inga that from the start is kind of, she's the one that's fueling the feud. So when she kind of just comes in for Abel for no reason, you know, saying, you're always cycling, and throws a bag of dog poo at her, which is very uncalled for.
Like, I get that, I mean, a dog shitting on your lawn is not a nice thing. You shouldn't have to pick up after that kind of thing. So I get that. But that seems to be the only thing that Eybjörg has done / not kept a lead on a dog.
Well, that is an interesting question. So obviously we get this kind of escalating sequence of events. So we get dog poo on the lawn, slashed tyres next?
So we have the dog poo on the lawn. That's when Inga calls Eybjörg a cow.
Yeah.
Which is like, wow, okay. But yes, then the tyres are slashed.
Then it's gnomes. But my question is that because it is left quite ambiguous, some of it.
Yes.
We don't see, apart from, obviously we see Inga taking their dog, but we don't, for example, see anybody slashing the tyres. We don't see anybody putting the gnomes anywhere.
No.
What was your interpretation?
Wow. I was rereading my notes and I found a note from, I think it was like, it must have been just after the gnomes sequence. So the gnomes are put into Conrad and Eybjörg's garden, and then they get put in the bin by Eybjörg, and then they reappear in Inga's house, don't they? And so after that, I was like, sometimes it kind of feels like, is something supernatural happening? Or my main thought was perhaps, I don't know where this film is going to go, so maybe Uggy isn't really dead, but he's like living in the loft or something, or in the basement, and he's the one playing tricks, because no one is caught on CCTV putting those gnomes back in the house. So, like, how did they get there at all?
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that, actually. That is a good point. I also had a similar thing with Uggy, that I feel like in a film, you know, it's Chekhov's gun thing, isn't it? In a film, if they ever say, okay, well, we assume he killed himself, but no one knows because his death was never kind of verified. He went missing.
Exactly.
You think, okay, right, he's obviously going to come back at some point. But it was interesting that they decided to leave that kind of open loophole, but then not necessarily bring it through at the end. Anything.
I wonder whether unresolved grief is much worse and hits home a lot harder, and we'll just never, you don't have the resolution. So until Inga gets that, then she's not going to move forward. But also, and Baldwin doesn't know how to deal with that.
It's like Baldwin said, I almost wish that your mother had seen your brother die.
Yes.
Because then at least that would be some kind of closure. So perhaps that's the purpose of that. Or perhaps he was in the attic all along. Or I thought it was going to be something that like Inga had killed him or something like that. I thought there was going to be more to that thread of the story than it turned out that there was.
Yeah. No, I think that was not just, but I think that's the driving force behind all nastiness,
issues, shall we say?
All the issues and all the terrible things she does. But also it is clear that maybe Atli is suffering a similar thing, and that's why I think Agnes says that he's numb when she talks to Baldvin. And so maybe he's not really got over his brother's death, but he's just acting in a different way to Inga. And who knows about Baldvin? He seems to be the character with his head on his shoulders, the most sensible. So because he goes to Agnes and he sits down and they're talking about, you should be solving this like grown-ups, which I thought was quite funny. And, he sort of understands the situation and helps her get her head around it, and almost is the reason that situation is resolved in a way. But moving on after that, he loses his shit as well. But I wonder whether that's more because of Inga and her actions rather than the loss of Uggi.
Þessi upptaka hefur það verið gerð með hennar samþykki?
Ég ætla bara rétt að vona það.
Og þetta bara eitthvað sem hann hefur átt allan lífinu, eða?
Já, ég gerir það fyrir þig.
Já, auðvitað það reið, ég skil það vel. Það einhver persóna á bak við mann. Skilnaður ykkar þarf fyrst og fremst að snúast hag Ásu. Hvað henni fyrir bestu. Börn eiga jafna rétt á að elska báða foreldra sína. Og svo að foreldrarnir elski ekki lengur hvort annað.
Og svo kannski snýst þetta ekkert þessa helvítis upptöku.
Bannað að blóta.
Já, það rétt. Fyrirgeðu, Engill. Við vorum ekkert búin að hafa mikið sem lengi. Mér bara fundist eins og hann sé alveg dofinn. En hann sé bara ekkert á staðnum, skilur. Og ég alveg búin að reyna að fá hann þess að gera hvað í sínum málum, en það bara hann gerist ekki neitt.
Skil. Það kannski afsökun, ég veit ekki, en þetta með Ugga hefur auðvitað lagst mjög þungt á okkur öll. Ekki síst alla. Þó hann vil ekki sýna það.
So after that chat with Agnes, he then has a chat with Atli in the tent, and they sort of bond again, and it's like, okay, father, son coming together. This is good. Hopefully they can then restore relationships with their mother and with Inga, and things were going to get better. But they don't. And the men generally are just so ineffective in every situation. They don't really do anything. Baldvin does call the tree surgeon. He does. The tree surgeon turns up, but because of I can't remember why they're arguing. Is it about the gnomes or the cat or
something?
I can't remember why, but he sends the tree surgeon away, and it's like that's just that's absolutely the wrong decision at this point.
I was intrigued by the kind of Inga Baldvin relationship, because I was like, why is he kind of going along with this when she's so toxic? If you're in a relationship with somebody who then you find out has abducted your neighbour's dog, taken it to the vets, had it euthanized, then had it taxidermied and placed it back on their porch. I think at that point I might be questioning my relationship with that person.
Well, yes. I mean, he's basically, after that, he's just like, because she essentially admits to him that she did that. We'll talk about that specific event in a second, but after that, he's basically just like so shocked and upset that I don't think he quite knows what to do in life. And doesn't he just then immediately go to the choir?
Yeah. I was glad to see some Icelandic choral music making a reappearance. I feel like every single film that we've watched has had some in.
Yeah, and I think it's a big part of Icelandic culture, isn't it? And obviously for Baldvin, it's a source of socialising and comfort. Yeah, although he's obviously a bit too preoccupied to actually sing at that point.
Aflífaður hundinn, stoppa hann upp. Ég farin á kóræfingu.
what she does is just so despicable. Like, it's absolutely another level from all the pranks that have been going on previous. Because you could describe everything previous to them as pranks in some sort of way.
Yeah. I guess that her interpretation is that she suspects they've killed her cat, when there isn't any evidence of that.
Except that the cat hasn't been around.
The cat has gone missing. But I guess that's what she would see as the next step of escalation. Okay, you take my cat, I take your dog. But the kind of slow and methodical way in which she does it, you know, there's so many points in which she could say, oh no, I'm not going to do this.
Yeah, this is too
Hold
much.
on a minute. Even she goes back in just when they're about to put the dog down, and you think she's going to say, oh no, don't, I've changed my mind. And she's just like, oh no, I'd like to take the body home with me.
That is mad. Yeah, I mean, that's from expectation to what actually happens. That is a complete 360 scenario.
That is full on serial killer stuff.
Truly, I'm not sure grief would really spur your brain to go, I'll kill a dog and I'll stuff it, and there's something about stuffed dogs which is inherently funny, but it's it's really uncanny.
Exactly.
But ever since JD's stuffed dog in Scrubs, I've found it hard to find them anything but funny.
Taxidermy is always funny. In a dark, morbid way.
But at least, I don't know, birds or smaller animals look vaguely realistic.
Yeah.
I don't know. The size of an Alsatian stuffed. It's just I don't know how Abigail was so convinced immediately.
I think what's good about that moment and why it's so striking is it's really audacious, isn't it? They could have easily made this film in which she had the dog killed and then she left it at the roadside or something, which I thought was going to happen, and would serve the same plot purpose, really. But the just outrageousness of having it stuffed and then placed on the front doorstep makes it so much more striking. And I think it's a moment that would stick with you when you think about this film for a lot longer because of that than if it had just been that she'd had killed it and laid it down dead.
Yeah, because based on what's happened, you could expect the dog to be involved in some way.
Oh, everything that happened I knew was going to happen. You know, when you see there's a cat, you're like, something's going to happen to that cat. When you see there's the dog, you know that the dog is going to be involved. And the tree, obviously, the tree being the biggest Chekhov's gun of them all, you know is going to have to come into play at some point, don't you?
Yeah, I knew the tree was going to be involved, but I wasn't sure that it was going to play out the way it did. Why Atlee's living at home but staying in a tent in the garden is beyond me. Why? Is it? He doesn't have a bedroom?
Because he's guarding the tree.
Oh, yeah. Well, he does a great job of that, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Sticks his headphones in, listening to a bit of Goose Goose, and then, yeah.
He has very good noise-cancelling headphones, that's for sure.
Considering they're just Apple iPod headphones, which we all know are shit.
You can't hear a chainsaw about 2 foot away from you and a humongous tree cracking in two.
Yeah.
I call bullshit on that.
But, dramatic, whatever it is. So many Chekhov's guns, because I was thinking, Baldwin, Conrad at the start is seen with his own gun at the firing range. I don't know why he has a gun. It doesn't get explained, but it does come into play at the very end, and we'll come to that. But yeah, you're right. The tree. I didn't think of the tree as actually being an object of devastation. I was just assuming it would be destroyed itself.
Yeah, same. whole kind of tension is that kind of middle class neighbours tension. So that Comrade and Egbert, you know, they have the fancy bikes, they have the fancy cars, they have the kind of gym kit, and they're very aspirational. So the kind of inference is that they probably have a bit more money, and the others are less so. And there is definitely some kind of tension there about partly, you know, kind of keeping up with the Joneses, but then obviously in a way that takes a very dark turn.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much Baldvin... I'm not sure how much I would...
Would you not agree with that?
Not necessarily. I mean, it's obvious that they have a better car and a better sort of way of life, but we don't know what Baldvin and Inga's way of life would be if they weren't sort of just stewing in their own grief. And the only reason they've got a shit car is because they kept Dougie's old car. I don't know if they have another car at all, but no, I'm not sure about that. That certainly didn't occur to me.
Well, there we go then.
They live in the same style and age of house, but maybe. So poor Askur is dead and stuffed, and seeing them carry the dead dog next door. I can't get over, like, you should be able to carry a stiff, animal. It's so horrible.
But again, it is funny.
It is very funny. And that's the moment. I've watched this film twice. That first time, I was waiting to hear your reaction to that moment, because the first time I was just like, what the actual fuck is going on now? Like, I knew it was going to go, spiral out downwards and outwards, but not there.
And from there, it really goes off into the deep end, I think. I think that's the turning point for sure.
Completely.
That is like, now we're just gone from what could be feasible neighbourly tensions into just batshit hysteria.
Sure, this is where the film takes its fictional license and completely runs with it, isn't it? It's like, because what happens then? So they confront them with the dog, and everyone's just a bit like, this is bad, this is weird, what do we do now? And Comrade, who you do recognize Comrade and Baldvin, right?
Yes. Don't worry, I've worked all this out in my head. Comrade, we've seen before in Let Me Fall as Magnea's father, right?
Yep.
Which I think made me go into this feeling quite sympathetic towards him. And then, of course, clearly I don't understand the premise of actors and how that works. And then Baldvin also felt quite sympathetic towards, because, of course, Gummy in Rams.
Absolutely.
We've gone full circle.
Yeah, and he's without his beard as well.
Yeah, he looks a lot more 21st century in this.
Yeah, a lot more 21st century, but also it really helps make him just seem a bit passive and just a bit wet. Whereas the beard, I mean, he was a farmer in Rams, but the beard makes him feel more rugged and I don't know, solid, and he knows what he's doing. And in this film, he's just hairless and ineffective.
I thought they both gave really great performances as well in this, for sure. Yeah,
because they have to turn it on. It's from nothing to
There's a lot of range to cover, isn't there?
Absolutely, and in it's the click of the fingers, it's just 0 to 100. Because then, obviously, the next big old event that happens is the final act, where Conrad's finally had enough. He's like, that is just, you don't stuff my dog. You don't kill and stuff my dog. That tree is going to have it. That's your pride and joy. We're going to get rid of it. So yeah, he goes and grabs his chainsaw, shoots out the camera.
But you need to mention also that the tree isn't the only thing in the garden.
Well, absolutely. He takes a chainsaw to the tree, but Atli's there in his tent. How did I not see that coming?
Did you not see that coming?
No.
Because I did. When they had the CCTV camera with the tent and the tree, I was like, I know where this is going. But I was very preoccupied about whether it was close enough to the tree to crush anyone inside. And as it turns out, it was.
Yes. Well, that's such a great moment, because it ends up being Baldvin's fault that Atli gets seriously injured.
How?
Well, Conrad's...
Because he was going to bring the tree down anyway.
He was going to bring the tree down, but, I mean, he could see that the tent was in the garden. I don't think his intention was to cut the tree down and kill Atli. So he would have, hopefully, he would have been going at it from the one side, then from the other side, and then sent it in, I don't know what direction.
I guess, if we're going to talk about this metaphorically...
Oh, are we?
We are. Atli's death, then, it's a culmination of them both, isn't it? You know, it's a culmination of this stupid two-side tension, that's this feud that's developed. So they're both to blame, really.
Oh, yeah.
Both literally and metaphorically.
Completely. It is everybody's fault. I don't know if it's ever... I don't think Atli actually dies.
Did you... Interesting.
Do we see him being taken away
We don't,
in an ambulance?
We see him being taken away, and then we see Balvin coming out of the hospital in a very...
catatonic
traumatized, catatonic state, which I read to mean he died.
Okay.
Because surely the only thing that could lead you to absolutely lose it and go after somebody with a gun would be the death of your son, surely.
Very, very possibly.
Although, having said that, his wife did kill and stuff a dog with pretty much no motivation. So,
Yeah, you're probably right. I think it is most heavily implied because by the end, there's no one around. We don't see Atli again.
And I thought that surely the fact that, you know, Agnes had kind of reached this resolution with Atli, they'd reached this point in which they were going to build, you know, rebuild a broken relationship, not to be together, but as parents, that then the point is that they were just about to get that back and then he's been killed.
Yeah, I think, you're bang on, aren't you? That's exactly right. Well deduced.
Thank you. Poirot over here.
And so Atli's death, obviously, that leads to the insane final 5 minutes, which is so different to the rest of the film. Because we've had this film that's been very understated. It's been quite calm despite the events. It's quite cool to look at. You got the dappled sunlight occasionally and the tree, and it's all very, calm. And then it gets to this moment after Balvin leaves the hospital, and suddenly it gets quite fast. It becomes handheld, and everything's quite frenetic. And there's fucking loads of blood.
Loads of blood, yeah. I didn't really see this coming, I have to admit. That there's a fight between the two men, which escalates in quite a similar way that the kind of feud between them has escalated over the last hour and a half. That it starts off, with arguing and grappling, and then we have the gun, which I guess is like a BB gun kind of
Maybe
thing.
some sort of rifle, small, not particularly dangerous.
Not deadly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we have a small knife, then we have a pitchfork, then we have it all layer by layer just gets worse and worse, and you think, okay, right, now they're going to back out, and no, they keep going.
I think that's what happens when you start fighting, though. I think it's very hard to then...
He's speaking from experience there.
All those battles that I've had throughout my life. Once you're in it, you're not going to stop until something makes you stop. Whether that's you...
Until you're both dead.
Quite. Whether you've had your insides torn out with a fork or your throat slit by a knife.
It's grisly. It's very grisly.
And that's what's so surprising, because there's no actual violence in the film. We don't see the dog even really being euthanized. Not that would be violent to look at, but there's no violence, or not on that plot strand. So then just to have this sudden, really crazy final, few minutes, it blew me away.
But I kind of loved it because, you know what, it was big and bold and brash, and you know, if you're gonna go for something, you may as well go for it with some full-bodied escalation.
Yeah, and it couldn't really have gone any other way. Like, you're not going to end the film with Baldwin coming out of the hospital and go, oh well, that was a bad feud we had with the neighbours, but Attley's dead now, so we should just leave it there.
It was kind of an interesting Lady Macbeth-esque dynamic in that Ingar had kind of like fueled this whole thing on, egged up the whole thing, and then it wasn't actually her that was. I really enjoyed the ending where we see her kind of left alone and the cat comes back, but it wasn't her that then is fueled into the final bloodbath. She's actually saved from it.
I really like that comparison to the whole Lady Macbeth thing. She's sort of orchestrating stuff, whether she means to or not. Everything that happens is because of her. Baldwin eventually succumbs to being kind of her crony and just deals with the situation in a way that he clearly doesn't really know how to do.
Yeah, it doesn't seem very him to do this. Like, he seems far too kind of chilled to escalate things to murder, as does Conrad. So it definitely kind of goes off the deep end a bit, that you think, really? Would this be happening? But from her, she's corrupted all their minds.
She really has,
maybe.
And she gets what she deserves. Like, there are no men left in this film by the end.
Also, I 100% knew that that's how it would finish. That turns out that the cat was alive all along.
Yeah.
And it was all in her mind.
Do you think the cat just literally went for a walkabout, or that maybe Conrad had dropped it off somewhere, or...
Oh, no, I think the inference is Conrad and Egbert had nothing to do with it. I reckon it went and got trapped in a shed or something. That's what cats do, you know?
Do they get trapped in sheds?
That's a thing, do you not know? No? Cats get trapped in sheds and then come back like a few weeks later.
Right, so they escape the sheds that they're trapped in.
I think this has happened to a couple of people I know, that their cats have gone missing, and then somebody has like opened their shed and the cat's been like, meow, it's been trapped in there for ages. Not their own shed, like a neighbour's shed or whatever.
Weird. Yeah, well, it seems, whatever
the
the reason for the cat going missing, it seems very plausible that it did just go off and not come back for a while. Yeah. That's what cats do. But yeah, I mean, it's quite a great moment for the film to end on.
Yeah, I thought it was a very smart, neat ending.
Yeah, very neat. And even if you knew it was coming, like it still works. It still hits that funny note, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Funny and tragic.
Well, that's this film, in a nutshell, isn't it? Funny and tragic. Any other bits and pieces throughout the film that you liked or didn't like?
I guess I'd just say, like, I really enjoyed the Attley plotline as a kind of standalone drama. But I do kind of wish that maybe we just had a bit more focus on the main strand, just to kind of keep the pressure on, or the tension on, almost. You know, that you felt a bit more like you're trapped there, because quite often the tension would be building and then we'd like jump away to Agnes for a bit, and then you'd come back and be like, oh, what was the last thing? Was there some gnomes, or what had happened? Yeah. And I just wonder, they were both really interesting storylines and both very well done, but I just wonder whether it might have been a stronger film to just stick with one of them.
Or perhaps just not to give it so much time. Yeah. We don't need to see every single time Attley tries to speak to Agnes.
It felt almost equally weighted, didn't it, really?
Yeah, and I don't think the two plots should be equally weighted, not especially considering, I guess the outcomes are supposed to show you can resolve issues like adults, which is a good little comparison, but not necessarily... Yeah, you're right, it did take away some of that tension, because that plot line isn't that tense. I felt quite strongly for Atli, weirdly, but I was never kind of massively worried that time was running out or that things were going to get much worse. I was just more frustrated that Agnes wouldn't talk to him.
Yeah.
So I think you're probably right, but it's a small little nitpick, isn't it?
Definitely it's a small nitpick. How about you? Did you have anything else?
Not especially. I just liked some of the jumpers again, and
Oh, yes.
generally the Icelandic style. Like that guy who works at the school.
I knew you were going to mention him when you said you liked the jumpers.
Yeah, if
I
I
was
could
like,
be
there's one
anyone,
standout jumper in this film, and it's that guy who works at the school.
Yeah, who hilariously knows so much more about Atli's life than he does.
Yeah, than he does.
No, and just like, I love the fact that, there's one IKEA in Iceland and they went to IKEA and that's the place that they went for their day trip. And it's just
Again,
so underwhelming.
very intendedly humorous.
Absolutely, because what we don't see in this film is any of the stuff that people would probably expect. There aren't any mountains. There isn't any snow. There's no fire. There's no volcanoes. There's just nothing except an IKEA. I love that. Love it.
Very wry.
Indeed. So yeah, thanks again, Ellie. That's great. And that's it. That's the final film for this series.
That's your lot.
How have you found it?
Really good. Really interesting, actually. And very enjoyable. A lot of stuff, again, that I wouldn't necessarily have opted for, but I've got a lot out of it, and I feel like I've got a decent sense of what Iceland is like, or kind of the preoccupations and the sense of humour and stuff, which has been really interesting.
Brilliant. And we'll discuss a little more of that, as well as who we've enjoyed watching on screen, and whether any of the films we've watched have made us want to visit again next week, when Ellie and I reconvene for a short end-of-series wrap-up episode. But that was Hafstein Gunnar Sigurðsson's Under the Tree, or Undir trénu from 2017. I'm still reeling from that stuffed dog. What did you make of it? Was it funny? Does Icelandic humour translate well? And how did it compare with Rams, the first film we looked at? I love them both. But that's it for Films this series. The first leg of our journey is over. But our dive into 21st century Icelandic cinema is far from complete. Who knows, we may come back, but in the meantime, we're keen to hear from you lot, and we'll be reading out any messages sent to us via Twitter next week, so please do get in touch. We're on Twitter at Kvikmyndapod, that's KVIKMYNDAPOD, and can be found on all major podcast platforms, where it would be lush if you could leave us a nice review and help persuade us to bring more Icelandic movies to the masses. Well, at least the niche podcast listening masses anyway. Thanks so much for listening. Takk og bless.